What's up, folks? Casual Dad here with another Warhammer Combat Cards deck building Warlord guide. This time we're going to talk about Abaddon the Despoiler. I had this guy in a Bruiser's deck building guide that combined a couple different Warlords, but to make sure the list includes everyone kind of in the correct order, I'm going to go ahead and throw him in there as well, as his own individual guide, which he deserves. He's the War Master of Chaos. He's the guy, the big bad of the Warhammer 40k universe at the moment. Not counting, the Chaos Gods. Yeah. But anyway, so coming in at a legendary warlord at an actually pretty decent price point of 43, just above the margin to trigger big game hunter, which is an issue. But he's a warlord that actually is pretty decently costed for what he brings to the table, especially with the recent stat change. He's got second double traits, and used to have Furious Charge, which has been changed to Fear, which makes him less aggressive, but it does make him significantly more durable on the board. And also you'll notice that Fear is his primary stat, so as you level him, you'll get to Fear and Max Fear, as seen here, which I'm very proud of, more quickly. Whereas the Avatar, who we've also looked at, has those two reversed. So you get your Inspiring Presence first, and then get your Fear. So it's actually a less durable card per cost per hit points, because it starts with the offensive trait and doesn't get the defensive one. So that puts Abaddon in the position of being the more defensive warlord, which is interesting, because that's not necessarily really his character. But the key thing about Abaddon is that his ability, which is this one here, when this warlord attacks, all your chaos cards, including those in your deck, gain +7 to all attack stats. Now right there are two reasons where you want to play Abaddon as early as possible. Number one, his ability does nothing until he's on the board and actively attacking. Number two, he also gives bonuses to the cards that are still in your deck. So you want to have something in your deck when you play Abaddon and have him out there punching things. Those also both, or his ability also really strongly encourages him to be aggressively attacking at the forefront, leading by example, which is very in character, which also puts him in tremendous danger. Because again, vulnerable to big game hunter, his stats are good, but they're not that good early on. Another thing I want to highlight is that his ability does also impact himself. So every time he attacks, his own attack stats go up, which is also compounded by Inspiring Presence. So he becomes real scary real fast. And just to go ahead and take a look at the deck I built with him, he is 43 points, which gives you quite a few points to play with still with a warlord like him, but you don't really want to. You want total control of what you deploy and when, and it's also really, really important to make sure that you have cards that will keep him safe, benefit from his trait, which means stay alive and get the kills to finish the game out without having other cards in there, but also benefit from his trait where he's beefing up their damage. Now, usually I like to keep a cheap... Actually, we're going to go ahead and swap this out. We are going to go ahead and... I'm trying to turn on this. So usually I like to keep a cheap Furious Charge in here. So that's the last card you keep in your deck. So as Abaddon is punching stuff, it's charging up and charging up and charging up until that Furious Charge becomes really, really dangerous. And hits really aggressively when it hits the table. Now, the alternative take I have on this one is, number one, because this guy is... Black Legion. Okay, so I'm trying to make this very themed with the Black Legion and cultists, so just for fun. But then also Deathblow has an advantage over Furious Charge. It's less aggressive, just like Abaddon himself, but it does hit multiple things and not just the target in lane. So it will clear a shield. It will clear out multiple cards. It'll clear out injured cards. The downside being that because I would save this guy until Abaddon is on the board, I couldn't play him in the middle, so he'd only hit 2 cards, not 3. But still is a reasonable thing to beef up with Abaddon's ability, and also actually has a really good attack stat because it's so cheap and has Deathblow, so it's meant to die. But yeah, so we're actually going to see how that goes in play. Yeah, let's take a look at it. Of course, we've got this kind of split between taunt. I've got 2 taunts. I've got some fear, and then I've got just an absolute bruiser in the place of Karn himself. Now, you'll also notice that this deck isn't full. I've gone ahead and filled it with a partial amount. And that, again, is because you want total control of what you deploy and when, and you want to play Abaddon earlier. If you have a thicker deck that has more cards, you won't have the choice to deploy Abaddon until you get to your last 3, which may already be too late in the game. And that also means that you'll have less stuff in your deck to go ahead and play after him. Okay, just to talk through some other good pieces in here. Obviously, it does really well with taunt. The key taunt that I like to include is going to be your Venom Crawler, because it also has that ranged attack stat, and a really good one. Because Abaddon's ability boosts all of your attack types, including ranged, psychic, and melee. So no matter what you put in here, it's going to benefit from Abaddon's ability. And this one has really good hit points, decent cost, and again has that high ranged attack. So it gives me a little bit of non-melee focus that is nice. This guy is the alternative one because he is cheap. I've got him in there instead of the 4 or 5 point taunts that are kind of the staples because I did want to fill the points. But then also just because he's got the extra hit points. I do really like this one here. And then this one here, of course, those are excellent choices to put in place with these taunts if you want something bigger than these guys in here in your 6-card deck or whatever size deck you want to run. But the reason you put taunt cards in this deck is mostly to keep Abaddon himself alive. You want to go ahead and make sure he stays on the board as long as possible, and so you want taunts that can actually take a hit, which is why I don't have the cheaper ones there. So yeah, that's why I've got that in there, and that is why I built it this particular way. But also, I really like keeping this deck Black Legion themed, just because that's kind of fun. So you can do that in there, and that's Black Legion themed. Another strong piece I've put in the deck quite often is this guy. He's only 5 points, easy to slot into a deck, has that ranged attack, but then also has Furious Charge. So as you've got Abaddon on the board for a while, really smashing stuff, this guy can come from the wings and do a shocking amount of damage, considering his 5-point cost and 28-point base damage. That adds up real fast when Abaddon is on the table swinging. Let's talk about some others. Of course, we've got another cheap Deathblow. This guy actually has a higher melee stat pretty quickly. So he's one I'll certainly consider as he levels up, especially since he does have Deathblow level 2. That's tempting. And then this guy is one I do usually keep in here as my very, very potent Furious Charge hitter, the one you keep in the tank to recharge and pop in aggressively. Also very appropriate because Abaddon himself is heralding a chaos attack, so it totally makes sense. All right, so let's see some other couple pieces. One of the more common Abaddon game or deck builds that you'll see is a 3-card deck. So if you want to run a 3-card chaos deck where you've got 2 Grade of Demons and Abaddon, you can do that. Have fun. Of the 3, I strongly recommend this one, of course, being that Fear will keep it alive longer and give you a better chance to go ahead and finish out the game. Also, of course, has all 3 attack types, so will benefit from Abaddon's ability in every single slot. Great piece. And then, of course, being the Bloodthirster Khorne, because Abaddon is essentially a melee piece, even if he buffs any attack type. Also has just a phenomenal melee stat to really punch through damage and finish out games quickly. And then really you can build with pretty much anything you want, but you do want to keep those things in mind where you don't want a full deck, you want the utility pieces to keep Abaddon alive, and you need a card or cards that will benefit significantly from Abaddon's ability. And then also I've both got Khorne and then Hearken the Worldclaimer, both because it's thematic. Well, he's thematic at least. And then I've got Khorne in here just as someone to really just throw at the wall. I just got him to level 9, so he got the Furious Charge, which is very exciting. And he's just a great piece to do damage and punch through opponents before you pull out Abaddon and to give you the best chance of finishing out the game possible. Now, one of the funniest things about, and so I'll go ahead and talk about this more, Fabius Bile is also a really good piece to put in there because of that Medicae and also great attack stats. He's one to consider in place of your more expensive Taunt because he does the same things, but adds a little bit more durability to the other cards on the board. Of course, I've got Gorder Bon on here because he is probably the single best bang for your buck melee card in the game, certainly in Chaos, but possibly in the entire game. Absolutely exceptional, having that Fear, high melee stat, good hit points, terrific piece. Another great one, of course, is this guy here, because he's got that Furious Charge and melee stat and comes in at a very respectable price point. He's actually one I would consider swapping out for Khorne. I'm actually reconsidering this deck right now, but I'm going to keep it as is. He's a really strong piece in there. This being another one, great piece to throw in there, has both Deathblow and Furious Charge. So as you're charging this guy up, he's playing very well with all of Abaddon's strengths and shoring up his weaknesses at the same time. If you get him up to level 9, which he's rare, or he's epic, so that takes a minute. Let's see some others. Any of your regen cards are good to keep in there. Any of your endless cards, any of your fear cards, anything that will keep you sticking. Oh, your shields, of course. Anything that will keep you sticking on the board to hold down lanes and let Abaddon really do his work, or things that support Abaddon himself, like your taunt and your Medicae. Now I've talked a bunch. Let's go ahead and just jump right in. Oh, but of course, these two are some of the strongest pieces, being your cheap melee target acquired to help clear through stuff, and then also your cheap Medicae to help keep everything alive. I'm going to go ahead and play this. Abaddon is one of my favorite warlords, but also one of the ones I consider the least competitively viable. I do want to make sure to say that because he's so high risk. He's so much fun to play, and it's so satisfying. Oh God, that's a terrible matchup. He's so much fun to play and just so satisfying when you get it to work, but it's, God, it's such a gamble. And I said that's a terrible matchup because this is against the melee powerhouse of the entire game. We're going up against Helbrecht, and he is a monstrosity. So I have to kill this thing as quickly as possible. And right off the bat, I really, really wish I had left home with my target acquired so that I could pick an opposing card and clear it and get rid of it before it became a problem, which it is quickly going to become a problem. And I've got a melee focused deck, so this is a case where I'd be better off having an alternative attack type, ranged or psychic, to fall back on so I could hit something and not get hit as hard back. But I didn't go with that in my build and usually don't. This should still work out, but oof, boy. How hard does this guy hit? Hits with 98. He's not going to kill Karn outright, so we're going to go ahead and ready. Do that melee debuff. Very nice, very nice. And this is going to be fun. Watch Abaddon himself really be clutch in this game. And that should give me enough for Karn to go ahead and punch through this guy. That is not a matchup I would usually do. I would not usually throw Karn against that thing because the Death Company Dreadnought there is a monster in melee combat and should comfortably take out any one-on-one you put it across from. But in this case, I had a nice balance of abilities. I had my taunt to keep me alive, and I also got the drop on him where I did get that Furious Charge. This is a problem, but also exactly why you try not to have too many 40 plus cost cards in your Abaddon decks, because you will run up against this guy, and he will quickly ruin your day. Okay, so, and I say that, and now I'm stuck having to place a, you know what, we're going to go ahead and do it. We can do this. This will bring Helbrecht himself. This is going to be brutal. And I will ready again because I have that melee debuff, which will really help give me the extra durability. This guy's low enough level, he only has one shield. But you can already see, like, every time I've had these sort of agonizing decisions between turns, it's exactly what I love about playing Abaddon, is he's a very challenging warlord to play, and especially challenging to play well. And another thing, too, is you bring Abaddon because you want to play Abaddon, put him on the board, and hit stuff. And anytime you play a game where Abaddon doesn't deploy, it feels like you lost even though you didn't, which is one of those extra perks that I actually find kind of fun about playing him. So this time I got lucky. This is a terrible matchup, but a lower level deck, so I'm doing just fine. But I'll play another one and see if I can get beat up a little bit more. Ooh, that is brutal. In terms of decks that Abaddon counters well, he's pretty abusive against decks like your Badruck decks that rely on chainsawing through weaker enemies, because most of the time you'll have a pretty durable deck. And a durable thin deck is exactly what something like that doesn't want to see. It also makes it a pretty decent matchup against Helbrecht because it is usually a fairly durable deck with a lot of hard-hitting melee pieces and usually with fear, so that it's hard for Helbrecht to really get traction because the Abaddon deck is really built to avoid all of the things that it would make it vulnerable to a Helbrecht deck. But still, Helbrecht decks usually are so bash your face and melee heavy that it's very, very challenging to take them down. So that was both a great and terrible matchup, which is funny. Like, Abaddon is best against the things he's also worst against, which goes totally in line with the theme for the Warlord, and is, again, one of the things I really like about him. If you like underdogs or you like challenging play, Abaddon is a really great pick to play with. Ooh, a mask. But it is quite a bit lower rated than me, so we'll see what we see. Oh, let me tell you one thing Abaddon is bad against. Artemis. Because it's usually a thinner deck with higher cost cards, even if you do kind of try to avoid that 40-point slot, Artemis just eats this thing alive. Just because you have so many different ways to punish a thin... Wow, that is an interesting deck. I'm going to watch this. This is going to be all of the Greater Demons, or I guess 3 of the 4 Greater Demons. And this is where we kind of bet on which is going to be the next one. I am going to bet it's going to be the Keeper of Secrets. But it could be, yeah, Keeper of Secrets, because then it would be all Psychic themed. Because this guy also has Psychic ready. So I'm going to call that. If it is not, well, we'll see. Now, these being low level is helping me, but this is still a pretty beefy deck because this is going to be just face to face, just banging our heads against each other. Raw stats against raw stats. And having Karn poisoned is not the worst thing in the world. I think that level alone is going to get me this one, but we'll see. Ooh, okay, not a Greater Demon. I guess I didn't do the math on the points before saying all that. Ooh, man. That exact same deck, if it was a little bit higher level, if that Lord of Change was doing more damage. But of course, having Fear across from it is really kind of hampering its abilities. God, Karn, you monstrosity. He's going to die here at some point, but take some stuff down with him first. Double regen and Fear. Man, that is gnarly. Okay. We're going a little crazy here, but I am winning. I'm not going to do. I didn't save any taunts for Abaddon himself. I used them to keep my other guys alive. For now. Oh my god. Okay. This. Just don't do it. Don't run cards that have rank 1 poison. It's just. It doesn't do enough damage to really be meaningful in any way, and it is just absolute hell if you end up against a card that has Berserk. If you hit rank 1 poison against a card with Berserk, you're going to charge that thing up to alarming heights for basically no benefit, because it doesn't take a meaningful amount of damage, but it does get a meaningful amount of attack back. Yeah. So epic cards with a secondary trait of poison, garbage. Outright garbage. That is my hot take. They suck. Don't play them. But you know what? If you like underdogs, you do you. Go ahead. But yeah, there were like 3 turns in a row there. I was like, oh, well, Karn is going to die, but that's okay. We'll live. But no, he didn't die because he was just there charging up his batteries like crazy. And Abaddon will comfortably finish this one out because we have a huge level advantage. So, but there you go. That is a guide to Abaddon. Hopefully I wasn't too much of a jerk at the end there. I really enjoy him as a warlord. Again, I do struggle to make him really successful. He has spent some competitive seasons where he is my absolute tippy top warlord in chaos. Other seasons where he just fails me utterly. It's kind of hard to say. Kind of depends on what you're playing against, luck of the draw, what time of the season you play. Yeah, sometimes if you're just too tired, decks are harder to play. So that's that. Hopefully this was helpful, and until next time.